that although the meeting is being held remotely, they're regarded as being present in a meeting of the council and they should observe the normal rules of behaviour. We have muted your microphones this evening, but we can unmute them later if we need to during questions. We will be asking you to use your mobile phones to access a Slido poll. However, please can you turn down the volume or switch to silent mode if your microphone is on. Please can I also advise that it is our intention to record this meeting and that this will be available on our website following the meeting. Please turn off your camera if you do not wish to be seen, and we would ask that those who aren't presenters would turn their cameras off during the meeting unless they're invited to speak. We have asked for questions to be submitted in advance and we will answer those first, but you can also submit questions via the chat function and we'll answer as many as we have time for. If we don't have time to answer your question tonight, we will send an answer via email after the meeting. So it's the topic for today is renewable energy, and I'm very pleased to welcome a varied panel of guests to talk about various issues around the topic. We're going to start off with a quick Slido. Anna, would you like to give that a go?
For those who are not familiar with Slido, there is a QR code here to scan with your phone, and there's also a code. You can go to slido.com and put in this code at the bottom, #3798156. Apologies, there's one vote on there when I was testing this out earlier, but the question is, at 3:30 this afternoon, what energy source supplied the majority of the UK's electricity? So quite a few votes for wind being the majority. Oh, gas has now pulled up as equal. There's a couple more options: nuclear, solar, imported, and coal. So I don't know if you want me to reveal the actual answer.
Yes, I think we've had over half of our attendees respond to that. So Anna, would you like to give us the answer, which helps provide some of the context for today's meeting?
So if I just start sharing the slides, the answer is, I just tap down. Gas. So gas was 42%. It's this blue section here. Closely followed by nuclear, 15%, and imports, which is essentially French nuclear power, I understand. And then wind and solar were lurking at the bottom with 14.9% wind and only 8% solar, despite how we're in the summer period. So that's a useful dashboard you can look at if you're interested in how the mix is going. Kelsey, back to you.
Right, thank you. Yeah, I think that provides useful context. We often hear about how wind and other renewables are providing almost all of the country's energy, but in practice, that's not happening the majority of the time. And we've identified the fact that renewable energy will play an important part in the district becoming carbon neutral by 2030. While we could be importing that renewable energy from outside the district, we think it's important that as a district we're playing our part in the provision of renewable energy where that's the right thing to do. So we're going to be talking around some of the issues around that this evening, and I'd like to introduce a brief video showing some of the context for what we're going to be talking about. Right, Anna, are you ready to share the video?
Sorry, bear with. I'll be there in just a second. Let's just get it.
This did work 10 minutes ago, by the way, everybody. This is a classic technology glitch.
Okay, let's try it again.
Thank you, Anna. So that sets some of the context for what we're doing this evening and for some of the work that we've already started and will be carrying on in the next few months. Chris, you might want to turn your camera off as we can see you eating your dinner. Right, thank you. We're working with a team of experts to support us in delivering our goal to be carbon neutral across the district by 2030. So that includes Buro Happold, which is an international consultancy, and Community Energy South, which is a not-for-profit organisation specialising in community-owned renewable energy projects. And we want to work collaboratively with our partners, organisations and communities across the Winchester district to find the best solutions for us to reach net zero as a district as a whole. Right, so I think this is the point to introduce Buro Happold, and I have Deepika Banerjee Sahai, who's a Buro Happold associate, to talk a bit about what they do as a company and what they're going to be doing for us.
Thank you so much, Councillor Leone. So Buro Happold is an international professional services firm headquartered in Bath. With 45 years of specialism in energy, water, transport and environment, we are delivering creative, value-led solutions for the benefit of people, places and planet. We have a proven track record of carrying out feasibility assessments on renewable schemes, regional decarbonisation strategies and local energy scheme designs. We have worked with over 25 council bodies in preparing their energy mapping and planning. Along with technical analysis, we also undertake detailed techno-economic and financial appraisals of those schemes. So now I will request Ollie to please introduce Community Energy South.
Why, thank you very much, Topeka, and hello, everybody. Good evening. Community Energy South was set up in 2013. We are a not-for-profit organisation that supports the development and mentoring support for community energy groups in the southeast of England. Our regional hub supports the growth of community-led projects. We do a lot of lobbying, also renewable energy and energy efficiency and fuel poverty projects. Our key projects include working with local authorities across the country to focus in on their net zero strategies and how they can engage with community energy. And that's called the Community Energy Pathways Project. We also have developed a program called Communipower, which is focusing on electricity networks and particularly focused on rural communities looking to decarbonise with decarbonisation plans. And we are co-founder of Riding Sunbeams with a charity called We Are Possible, climate change charity, and ethical investor Thrive Renewables. And we're looking at the route to market for directly powering the rail network. And we've done some of that work in Winchester before in Hampshire. So our approach combines mentoring, training, networking, and best practice engagement. Thank you. I'm going to pass on to Andrew.
Sorry, Ollie, I just stopped sharing because I got a message there were people in the lobby, but I can't see anyone waiting in the lobby.
I can't see anybody else in the lobby.
So I'll reshare.
Yeah. So that's Community Energy South. We love working with communities and with renewable energy, and we've got a long-standing relationship with Buro Happold and also with Hampshire County Council, where we've been supporting the community energy sector. So I'm going to pass you on to Andrew Cummins from Buro Happold to lead you through the presentation. Hi, Andrew.
Thank you, Ollie. I think Topeka will start off and then I'll finish off on our renewable slides. Over to you, Topeka.
Thank you so much, Andrew. So just to introduce quickly myself, I'm an electrical engineer and a postgraduate in international trade law with around 20 years now working in the renewable space. So renewable energy is generated from sources that naturally replenish themselves and will never run out, like solar, wind, and water. So what are the main benefits? It can combat climate change because it creates no direct greenhouse gas emissions. Renewable energy can decrease pollution and therefore reduce threats to our health. They are reliable as these sources are unlimited. So once built, these renewable facilities cost very little to operate and the fuel is often free. As a result, renewable energy prices tend to be comparatively stable over time. And the challenges are low efficiencies, network connectivity issues, and intermittencies. So, however, advances in technology makes renewable more accessible, affordable, and efficient day by day. So now let us take a bit of a deep dive in different kinds of renewable technologies. So the first one we are going to talk about is how we can harness the solar energy. So if we can put solar panels, which we can mount on the roofs of the building, we can actually generate whether on an individual level or collectively. So when I say collectively, I think Ollie will touch more upon it later on, that there are organizations who are ready to actually install these kind of panels on collectively on many rooftops, and they not only install but they maintain it as well, and they can have agreement with you to give you some cheaper prices. So for example, if it's 35p at the moment you're paying to the grid, they can put in a place and they can have an agreement with you that they will give this much of energy at only 20p. Now definitely has benefits. This technology, it is easy and cost effective to install. It has very low maintenance and it does not require any land to be developed. However, the cons are that this is intermittent. It is very much dependent on sunlight, though we can say that battery technology has come in, which can actually save a part of that energy which you generate in the daytime and use later on in the evening where there's no sun. But still, a battery at the point is a bit costly. So I think with technology moving and improving day over day, that will again become very affordable. And the other challenge, which again, technology-wise, engineers are working on it, disposal of these panels. There are some environmental issues, and however, there are recycling techniques and everything tried to develop to combat that. Now, the same panels, similar panels, if we put on huge amount, if we can just go on to the next slide, please, on some fields, we can actually generate huge amounts of electricity. Now, whereas on the rooftop, it was a bit limited. Here now, the generation, when it goes to the ground mount on fields, it can become really, large quantity. Now, with that large quantity, what we really get is really cheap. This is the cheapest way to generate solar or renewable energy, I should say, very fast to build. And there are no concerns of the land use to a point that sheep can still gaze. There is again an improved quality of wildlife which can be introduced. But the only challenge I think which comes is the challenge with visual impact. There might be alternative other uses of the land which might get restrictive. There is a kind of lack of suitable location and ability to connect to the national grid, because these are such huge quantities of electricity that in most of the cases, we have to get connected to the national grid. And any kind of challenges on the grid side, on their side of assets which have been put in, that might be a bit of a challenge. And then we also have a kind of an environmental impact of manufacturing these equipments. Again, this stays same with all the equipments, I would say. But what we really need to focus on is how to have a more effective kind of a recycling of these panels, which are not harmful to our environment. Next slide, please. So after seeing how we can harness the solar one, we are trying to see how we can harness the wind energy. Now, wind energy is quite abundant in UK. And what is done actually in wind turbines, as the wind turns the blades of the wind turbine around the rotor, which spins a generator and creates electricity. Now, because this doesn't use a lot of land, and the other thing is that this technology has become so advanced at the moment, and that there's so abundant skills available around the same, that government has actually ambitiously increased the target from 40 gigawatt to 50 gigawatt in 2030. Now, this I'm talking about the offshore one. Where the onshore one is concerned, at the moment, government is under a consultation where they are trying to develop local partnerships for onshore wind in England. And they are trying to see that where they can support those people with exchange of cheaper electricity. So that consultation is still going on, and I think it is still 7th of July. Now, the only challenge again with them is it is the visual impact. Now, electricity generation depends on wind speed. So the amount of wind power is limited by location, and there is a risk also environmental side that birds can collide. So that I would summarize is wind is very abundant, very lucrative option. However, if we move to the next one, please. Anaerobic digestion. So what is anaerobic digestion? It uses organic materials such as sewage, animal manure, and waste food. This is broken down to produce biogas that is mostly methane and carbon dioxide. The biogas is then burned to produce electricity. Now, on the other side, when we talk about the solar or the wind or the water, which I will cover later on, these are the ones which don't emit any kind of emissions, pollutions back to the environment. Whereas the anaerobic digestion and others, there are few that they do, but still comparatively, they really produce very less pollution in the environment compared to the other fossil fuel generation. So the pros, it's a big take that it is actually making use of the waste material, and it produces excellent compost byproducts like compost and fertilizers. The only challenge I would say is that it requires a constant supply of organic material, and which means that sometimes locally that might be a bit of challenge, but it also says that it can only be operated at comparatively relatively small scale, and there's always a risk of toxic spills and odor. On another slide, please. Thank you. So in landfill gas capture, what is done? It is a natural byproduct of the decomposition of the organic waste in landfills. It is mostly made up of methane and carbon dioxide. So the landfill gas can again be extracted to produce biogas. And in a very similar fashion, a combustion engine or biogas generator can burn that gas that is captured to convert into electricity. So this reduces the amount of methane being released into the environment, which is a big take environmental wise. However, again, the challenges are these are not large scale. They can be implemented on a very small scale at a renewable generation basis. So can we please move to the next slide? Another interesting one is water. So hydroelectricity is a form of renewable energy that uses the power of moving water to generate electricity. The best part with hydroelectricity is that it is very controlled. Unlike with the solar one or the wind one, which we saw, which was very intermittent, this one is very controlled. So which means it can actually help us better manage our demand and supply. But the challenges with this one is that the building up cost, the capex cost is humongous. And apart from that, other challenges of lack of suitable waterways or reservoirs, and that dams significantly impact the rivers and their wildlife. So with this kind of introduction to various kind of technologies which we're exploring for the district, I will now request my colleague Andrew to discuss a bit about the power of renewables for our need. Thank you.
Thank you, Deepika. Yes, I think as has already been said, the slides will be shared afterwards, and we thought with this table that will be more use than you trying to read it now. I won't give a full overview of it. I'll just give you a quick introduction, essentially. So this is for context. Different renewable schemes will vary a lot with the lead-in time through things like planning, but this is just to give an indication of scale and the application of them. So as Deepika has highlighted, things like rooftop solar, that's a key technology being explored in terms of number of deployments in the UK. You see a lot of it, but it is relatively small scale. The cost is, I'd say, medium to high at £56 per megawatt hour of electricity generated. So that's the average cost over the lifetime of the scheme, how much each unit of electricity will be. For a reference point to these numbers, it's quite interesting to look at the nuclear industry, where it's probably about £100 per megawatt hour is what tends to be agreed there. So a lot of these renewables, they're significantly lower. So ground-mounted PV in the UK currently, generally the cheapest, does vary depending on where you're building your wind turbines. On an offshore wind, tend to generate a lot more electricity per installed megawatt of energy, but they are slightly more costly than the solar equivalent, but that's coming down as turbines get bigger and more efficient. They also tend to take a bit longer to construct, and the planning process as well will tend to be longer for these. But particularly for offshore wind, the scale is much larger. You're talking 10 times the size of large solar farms when you get out to offshore wind. As Deepika said, anaerobic digestion is a very good technology at the small scale, and by reducing methane emissions into the environment, in some ways you're actually got a bigger impact than just if it was just doing that, you're burning it, so you're putting out carbon dioxide, which is much less harmful as a greenhouse gas than methane, but essentially you want to be reducing waste, and that feeds through into the landfill gas. With hydropower, there is some opportunity for this in Winchester, but it's very high cost. You would only be looking at the smaller scale run-of-river schemes, and you have very sensitive and high value chalk down and stream. So there's risks associated with that. You could do it, but it's not really a high priority as we see it. With tidal power, obviously not on the coast, but solar's got huge tidal streams, and it is being pursued off the Isle of Wight and test. There's always looking at sort of test sites off there, but very high cost and not really relevant to Winchester's journey, but it's in a broader regional sense, there is some resource there, whereas the wave power is probably less so here, and is also by far the most expensive technology on here. So if you want to skip on to the next slide, please. As I said, that table is probably more one to take away and just look at. So what's being done in Winchester at the moment? What's the sort of context in general? Current energy consumption in Winchester, about 3,500, 3,600 gigawatt hours of energy a year, which is about slightly more than 2% of the UK total. And Winchester's got about just a bit less than 2% of the UK population, so slightly more energy consumption per capita than the UK average, which, given the rural nature, you'd probably expect with higher transport associated energy use. That is all energy, not just electricity. Electricity is about 20% of that, a little bit less than 20%. And it's the fossil fuels, so not the electricity side, despite the side we've seen with gas. We are decarbonising the grid relatively rapidly. It's transport and heating, particularly gas and heating. You see a huge amount of that contributing to the total carbon emissions. And what we're going to see as we decarbonise in general is much greater demand for electricity. So building renewables makes more sense. And that's interventions will go across all sectors. So it's not just the electricity sector, it's much more going into changing the way we use energy in general across domestic, the commercial, industrial and the transport, as well as land use and waste. And again, being rural, Winchester's got good opportunities in that land use side as well, and got to consider that when thinking about renewables. Winchester City Council, you're already got a carbon neutrality roadmap, so there's strategy here for that, which has identified a lot of things, not just renewable deployment, but what has been highlighted, particularly at early stages, is building renewables to start with has a big impact on the carbon, and that's particularly in early years. Building renewables is important because that's got the most impact on decarbonising the grid. So overall grid share of electricity, as you've seen, there's going to be more offshore wind and things coming, but that's going to take time. Whereas if you put renewables in now, that's got a bigger impact on not just Winchester, but that contribution to the whole of the UK and that electricity balance in terms of increasing the renewable deployment and share. Conscious of time, I think I'll hand over to Ollie now to talk more about the community side.
Thanks, everybody. So I think if I jump onto the next slide, Anna, because I've already introduced myself. The renewable, with regards to renewable energy and community benefit for community energy schemes, renewable energy can provide financial benefit to local communities in the form of community benefits, but also with, if there is an option for community ownership. This would allow businesses and organisations and local people to invest in renewable energy development and receive a return. So we're going to hear from West Solent Community Solar in a minute, and Claire about that. So where a renewable energy scheme is set up with a community share offer, which is regulated through community shares unit, and people can invest in it on a yearly basis. So so it's a really good way of investing locally in renewables and climate. There's also looking at energy buying clubs, so maybe a street or a business to come together and buy renewable energy together at a cheaper cost. And we're seeing this across the country and sort of sharing it across Hampshire and those ideas. And then community benefits funds that are usually established, whereby a portion of the profit from a community energy scheme is ring-fenced for local environmental and low carbon projects. And in the case of a community energy project, that is overseen, one shareholder has one vote, and it's overseen by a board within a special purpose vehicle, so that it's invested within environmental and low carbon projects. So it's a really good way of reinvesting the profits from the solar farm. So with that, I'm gonna pass over to West Solent Community Solar and Kathy Cook.
Thank you very much, Ollie. I'm just about to share my presentation, so I'll just do this. Is that triggered? Did that work? Open share. There we go. There we go. Can everybody see a picture of a field?
Yes,
Yes.
Kathy, yes, lovely
Good.
gate.
The opening. This is the field where West Solent Solar Cooperative, we formed in 2013, and this is the field that our founder chairman, Anthony Woolhouse, this is the field he found and felt this was a very good location, and he asked me to come along with him, as I'm a chartered engineer, and to have a look at this. And I couldn't believe my eyes. Here is a flat field and it's ex-landfill, and prior to that it was a gravel extraction site. So the land is very poor quality, and this is the field after one season of grass growth with just a single species grass seed being sown on it. So it was very, very poor. So the first thing was that we felt, yes, perfect. I'm just going to tell you what we went through. We have a little shopping list, really, when you want to create a solar farm, shopping list. And so first of all, you need a field, and preferably flat and not too much shading to the south so that you get lots of sunshine. So I'm looking due north, and so you can see it's a pretty good location. This is then looking across the field, and this is an absolute gift for us. We had these overhead power lines. You could see these. Can you see this with my cursor? I'm pointing at the power lines here on that side of the field. So we have a power line, 11,000 volt power line, actually goes right across the field. So it was perfect for exporting electricity if we were going to put a solar farm on this field. The next question is then, sorry, apologies about that. The next question is finding out whether there is actually, as Peter said, about the capacity on the grid. And then there were lots of conversations with Scottish and Southern electricity networks to find out whether we could actually export electricity onto the grid. And that took several months. And that was probably the hardest part of the whole process of building our solar farm, was actually securing that network connection. But we did eventually, with quite a lot of pressure and help from other professionals who are experts in this field, we did eventually get that agreed, and we have a 2 megawatt connection for our solar farm. Next thing is planning and getting good advice from your planning department locally, and we were very lucky that we had a sympathetic ear at the New Forest District Council, and nobody indicated that they were going to object. We did a lot of canvassing around our local neighbours, and that worked very well. The next thing is, as Ollie has already indicated, you need your funding to be able to build an asset like this. And so we launched a share offer in early 2014, and that went extremely well. We all put in a lot of work to let this be known throughout the community that this was coming, and this was oversubscribed, and we actually had to close the scheme early. So we had the money, and then the next thing was to find some really good contractors, and we chose Solar Century, who have now been sold to Statcraft, and Aaron Construction Services, who are a local contractor on the south coast, and we shared the same ethics and values and got on really, really well. We all wanted to see a really good outcome to the project. We also need to then, once you have got your solar farm being constructed, you need to then think about who you're going to sell your electricity to. And so we went with Co-op Energy, another cooperative like ourselves, and they are now owned by Octopus Energy. So that's who we're with. Finally, the last factor is you need a great team. And we have a set of volunteer directors who are absolutely passionate about renewable energy and making sure that our cooperative can continue. We're 9 years into the life of the project, and we've got another 11 years left of the formal project, but the possibility of extending it for another 10 years after that. So that's really good. Having a really good support network is vital. Energy for All provide our management and accounting function, very, very knowledgeable about all aspects of renewable energy projects. Hampshire and Isle of Wight Wildlife Trust have been absolutely amazing in terms of helping us with our biodiversity, which I'm going to show you a little bit more of in a moment. Co-ops UK, again, the whole ethos of cooperatives and how to ensure that you're doing all the right things, the cooperative values and principles, those are really important to what we want to do. And Solar Energy UK is the key solar industry organisation. I'm not going to show this to you, but I can show you, there's the overhead, the aerial shot of the solar farm way back in 2014, looking rather barren. And you can see the fields around it are all similarly ex-landfill fields. So they'd been topped off with poor quality soil. So things are gradually improving. There is a construction video, if anybody's interested, on our website, westsolentsolar.coop. Now I'm going to talk to you about the biodiversity, because we feel this has been a really enjoyable and very rewarding part of the whole solar farm project. It's been part and parcel. It's not just been about generating solar electricity, it's about this poor field, helping it to recover and doing everything we can. So we have worked hand in hand with Hampshire and Isle of Wight Wildlife Trust, who have some very knowledgeable people, and we feel this has gone extremely well. So we started off with working parties planting hedging plants all around the whole perimeter of the field, 5,500 trees, tiny saplings. And this is how it was in 2013-14, a very wet, muddy field, very difficult to work the ground because it was so poor from the previous existence as a landfill site. So this is how it was, and this is one of our hedgerows today, which is a huge difference compared to how it was 8-9 years ago. So we have wild rose, we have willows, we have hawthorns, we've got some holly trees. Also hazel, I can't remember all the different species, but they're all indigenous species. So we're thrilled, and this is improving bird life and insect life on the solar farm. And in terms of our biodiversity net gain, which is the measure we all have to use these days, we have a 65% net gain compared to how our non-existent hedges were before. They're still classed as quite poor quality because we've got no mature trees in them. So, give it another 20 years, we might get a few more points on the biodiversity net gain score for the hedgerows. But we're delighted. It's made such a difference. We have a very important grounds maintenance team who look after the field. And we have a flock of sheep who come in twice a year. They come in the spring and they nibble the grass right down in the spring, so that they leave in early May, and it means that they will have eaten all the grass. The grass can't get away as fast as the wildflowers. So the wildflowers then suddenly spurt forth, and they're growing really quickly in May, June, and the grass will grow, but it doesn't overtake the wildflower. So that works really, really well. Then the sheep come back in September for about 10 to 12 weeks through to early December, and they just eat all the dead heads off everything that's grown over the summer, and it then just takes it right down to, again, pretty much ground level for the winter. And we found this has been very, very beneficial in terms of boosting our biodiversity. And so I'll just show you some lovely pictures of how the field looks. Here's a bee orchid on the left. We had a couple of years ago, we had an absolutely amazing number of bee orchids. We've had about a dozen or so this year. It's been a bit hot and dry, so they've probably grown and shriveled before we actually spot them this year. On the right, there's all sorts of different wildflowers. Lady's bedstraw is the yellow, common mallow is the purple, and the various knapweeds as well as the oxeye daisies with the look like chrysanthemums. So we also then, as a result, get lots of insects. So here's a mottled white on a knapweed. greater knapweed plant, and then here's a small skipper on a fleabane plant. And we have had some reptiles. So here is a slow worm we discovered under one of our reptile mats. So we have also had unusual orchids. So there's a common spotted orchid on the left and a pyramidal orchid on the right, and in the middle the little damselfly. So we're absolutely thrilled with how the field is developing. And in the left hand picture here you can see there's a gentleman holding some wildflower samples that he's just picked, and this is John Durnell. He is one of the directors at the Hampshire and Isle Wildlife Trust, and he was there on Saturday, this last weekend, at our biodiversity tour, our annual event, which we hold on the field, taking members of the cooperative and also friends and family and others who are interested to come, taking them on a trip around the field. And it's so interesting. I learn something new every year, so it's really lovely. So this is all part of linking with the community as well, letting everybody know about how we can create wildflower meadows, because we desperately need to. Apparently we have lost 98% of all wildflower meadows in this country since World War II. So we feel at West Solent we are doing our little bit to try and restore on 12 acres of land around our solar panels what's being lost. We need to all try and do something. So that is a great thing about solar farms. They are quiet, undisturbed, and if managed well, you can really regenerate nature. It's just a lovely feeling. We also work with the community in terms of doing solar farm tours. Here's the eco group from the Lymington Infant School. They had a lovely time and they came in April, and we also have community groups who come and visit. So we enjoy those more social links with our community. I'm also just going to talk to you a little bit about the community grant fund that we run. We have had quite a few grants we've given out now, which is quite pleasing. About half of them are energy efficiency measures. So this is a set of new LED lights that we provided funding for in a school in Salisbury. And here is some energy efficiency measures being installed on a boiler on a school in Southampton. And we put in thermostatic radiator valves in another school in the New Forest. And they've all made a tremendous difference to these schools' energy bills. We also like to focus on what I might call eco-educational projects, and this is one of those. This is the Lymington Repair Cafe, and we provided the funding to get that kick-started and holding their first event, and then materials and equipment to allow them to carry on doing that on a repeated basis. So everybody had a wonderful time, and I think it's very, very popular as a like a public service, isn't it, really? Repair Cafe. Finally, we've helped fund a group of primary schools in the Test Valley with hot composters, so they can put in all their fruit and vegetable waste, and some of their cooked food waste apparently will rot down, and then this will be used in their vegetable gardens that they all have. So we're very excited to see how that actually works out. So that's the latest one. So in summary, we have a lovely solar farm, 2 megawatts on a field which used to be a landfill site. We think this is the best way to help it recover. The field couldn't be used for anything else. We are really enjoying, and we really value the whole process of the biodiversity development process. And having a community grant fund means that we've got a way to actually help our local community groups and organisations to be more energy efficient and more aware of their environment, and to understand a little bit more about the solar farm as well. So that's it from me. Thank you very much indeed. I will unshare, and here we go.
Oh, Kelsey, you're
No.
muted.
You're muted.
Yeah, apologies. I was trying to make sure that my keyboard didn't wasn't heard over the presenters. So thank you very much to all of our presenters. Yeah, particularly Kathy, you know, that 65% biodiversity net gain is really impressive, and I think shows that there are side benefits to some of these forms of renewable energy. We're now moving on to our question and answer session. What I will do is that I will unmute people so that they can ask their questions. We have been joined by Chris Gillam, who pre-submitted his question. Chris, would you like to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yeah. Sorry, just a second. Yes, that was really a question more about commercial schemes, and how we should address them, because the sort of splendid example we've just seen just shows how important it is to having communities involved. The question was sort of large-scale renewable energy schemes in rural settings are inevitably worrying to those most closely affected by them and who have nothing directly to benefit from them. For them, the scheme developers are making money by externalizing their costs onto local communities. Cannot planning policy ensure that communities asked to bear the brunt of such necessary schemes get some quid pro quo, e.g. discounted energy or provision of community facilities?
Right, would anybody on the panel like to respond to that around planning policy?
I'm happy, Kelsey. I'm happy.
I'm actually going to invite Bridget Taylor, who's doing some work with us on the planning side of things, to come in and answer that one. Sure. Bridget, do you want to comment on planning policy?
Yes, hello. So I'm Bridget Taylor. I'm a chartered planner. I formerly worked at the council in the planning policy team, and I've also formerly worked with Buro Happold. So I'm involved in this project as to sort of help, not that we're at a planning stage, but to make sure we're really thinking about planning considerations as early on in the process, because obviously whatever comes forward will have planning implications that need to be factored in. So I mean, the policy situation at the moment, I think, you know, the current policy does express some support for renewable schemes, but also, as we know, talks about development in the countryside, and that development would need to have an operational need for a countryside location. And the new local plan, which is underway at the moment, does propose, so it's Regulation 18 local plan at this stage, does propose a policy which offers some, again, support for renewable energy generation. And it goes a bit further than the current policy in terms of detailing the kind of considerations that any renewable energy scheme would need to consider and what would be taken into account in the planning process. So I think work is underway in that regard. It wouldn't go as far as the financial aspect of who's benefiting from the income generated by the scheme, but certainly the planning policy aspect can make sure considerations such as the construction impacts, the traffic impacts during construction, the visual, the landscape character, ecology, all of those really important considerations, also the value of the land for agriculture, the heritage, as well as obviously a big one around Winchester and the potential for archaeology to be affected, and so on. So planning policy can do all of that. And in terms of the financial benefit, I think that's what this project is about, is trying to bring forward some community-led and partnership working to bring forward some schemes that can really benefit the community.
In terms of that question about planning policy, are you aware, Bridget, of any other local authorities who have planning policies which require community benefit as part of renewable schemes?
Not that I'm aware of, because there is a general, obviously, policies sort of rapidly developing in this area, because everyone's aware of the need to go further, but different local authorities are at different stages with getting their new FET plans moving forward. So I think Winchester's draft plan is actually quite progressive compared to many around the country at the moment. So has got some really good thinking in there about sort of how far planning policy can go. But as we've all found many times before, the planning has a remit, and we have to take the local plan through an examination, and we have to show that those policies are fair and balanced, and that development can still be viable and so on. So there's a bit of a check and balance there in terms of how far we can go and what the policy requires.
Right, thank you. Ollie, did you want to add anything to that?
Well, okay, so two things. One is that there's currently been a public consultation within central government on community benefit for infrastructure projects, but that should provide some additional guidance by the time it gets through the sausage machine, if you like. But that was quite an interesting process. There's also a public consultation on onshore wind as well, actually. But no, the question also covered local supply of energy. Now, we still can't do that. There's a movement through government called the Local Electricity Bill, which we lobby for heavily. Over 300 MPs have signed up for it. There's a couple of clauses are being taken out at the moment by government, but that's being challenged by the House of Lords. So yeah, the ability to be able to supply energy directly from renewable schemes. There are mechanisms now with something called Energy Local, but it's very much in its formative stage. There's something else called Urban Chain, which is like a blockchain mechanism, and so where you can get benefits from local schemes. So we're keeping a real close eye on it and pushing hard, but it will unravel over the next 2 years, I should imagine. So yeah.
Right. Thank you. That's very helpful. We'll certainly have a look at that as the planning process progresses and see what we're able to do. Right. So thank you for that question, Chris. I'd like to ask Danny Lee. Danny, I've enabled your microphone. Would you like to ask your questions? Right, Danny, you still need to unmute yourself if you want to talk.
Okay.
Yes, we can hear you now. Thanks.
Thanks. Sorry about that. Well, I think my questions are clearly slightly outside the mainstream of how to go about delivering the necessary benefits for the climate, biodiversity, food and energy crisis. To my mind, they need to be all joined up. And I know we have to play within the planning rules, and I know that DEFRA has some strict rules about what you can and cannot do with the most versatile and valuable agricultural land. But it seems to me, in my humble opinion, that if we can use land and light twice, in the way I've suggested in the chat, then we enhance the revenue for farmers, we deliver a more sustainable income for them, and we start to help them with respect to delivering for us in terms of food security, energy security. So I think there's a bigger game to play here, and I just wondered what the opportunities might be. Obviously, the local plan is going to go to Reg 19 soon. Is an opportunity to perhaps anchor some of the thinking in this respect. So that's my first question, and secondly, question for Ollie and others: has this been done anywhere else? I'm not talking about the Solent project, which is great. I'm talking about what's been done in France, China, America, Germany, and so on, where you elevate your ground solar. Yes, the payback is longer, but the benefits are manifest. And I really think we need a game-changing approach if we really are going to get on and renature the less valuable land, and then perhaps maximize the opportunities of a land that's already been developed for agricultural use? So that's my first question. Should I carry on with my second, then answer them all together?
I think we'll take that first, because the second one's about a different topic.
Okay.
So does anyone have any comments about using land twice?
I probably could start off, but I think it's probably...
Oh, I think Bridget's just frozen.
I mean, I'm happy to come in on that one. I think it's agrivoltaic. Oh, sorry, Bridget's back. Do you want to go ahead, Bridget?
Sorry, my internet's a bit patchy. So yeah, I was just going to say, so the draft policy in the local plan talks about, obviously, if there's loss of best and most versatile agricultural land, then that will be a negative factor in the planning balance. But if there's a technical solution which ensures that can continue alongside the technology, then that obviously can be factored into the planning balance. So for the technical side, you carry on, Andrew.
Thank you. Yeah, I think agrivoltaics obviously are a really important growing thing, so can be considered in these instances. You tend to see them in hotter, sunnier places, but with climate change, it's becoming perhaps more suitable in the UK. And it's also that thing with solar versus wind. With wind, you've got a far lower footprint of what's actually needed in the field. So you do quite often see single turbines, and it doesn't actually impact the use of the field very much at all in terms of land's need. The footprint of the base of a turbine is much smaller than the swept area by the turbine, so you can actually extract much more energy in terms of density for that. And actually, the power density of wind turbines has sometimes been quoted as being higher than fossil fuel and nuclear plants because of that little footprint of the turbine on agricultural land.
Yeah. So there are benefits. Great.
Yeah.
Shall I go on to my next question?
Yes, go on to your next question, Danny.
Again, my next question, it's all about trying to accelerate the need for renewable energy in the area. I know Anna has done some work with a consultant. I know there's a beta tool, and I know the Centre for Sustainable Energy has also developed some excellent tools, and I'm sure Buro Happold have got some excellent tools as well. So my question is, is there a way to get these tools into the public domain as a free service to accelerate the take-up of renewable energy opportunities, a pull rather than a push system?
Right, I'll actually invite Anna Wise to come in on that one about where we are on our geospatial analysis.
Yeah, so we've commissioned an analysis of land parcels and rooftops, but we are just negotiating with the company who did it to about getting the license and being able to share that on the public platform. So I am hopeful it will come very soon, but it's just a bit mired in a legal agreement just on whether we can share their work.
So it sounds like in principle, Kelsey, Anna, it's a possibility.
Oh yes, definitely. And if anyone wants to contact me, I'm happy to sort of share, look into it and send them screenshots and stuff. But at the moment, we're just having difficulties getting it onto our website in the public domain. But hopefully coming soon.
Sure, that's great.
Yes, so that's definitely to move on with. Yes, if you can, final question, and then we'll move on to somebody else.
Yeah, I think it's just the Environment Act and local nature recovery strategy. You've heard me say this before, Kelsey. I just think we need to be very careful about utilising and promoting biodiversity net gain as a brilliant byproduct of ground solar on these, shall we call them suboptimal sites. As I say, I think the agricultural voltaic approach is better because you can then use the suboptimal or less fertile sites to do that nature recovery or rewilding, which I think then balances out the four crises I mentioned. So it's all about this sort of joined up thinking. Not that I want to disparage the Solent project, which is brilliant, but I think there's a more optimal way to do that. And I just wondered whether anyone's got any comments on that.
Andrew, did you have anything?
Sorry, my thing wasn't unmuting. I think, no, it's very much so. One thing I forgot to mention when talking about agrivoltaics is with additional structures, there is a slight increase in embodied carbon in those, but I do agree that in principle, maximizing land use is hugely beneficial, but it is a site-by-site basis, and consideration of what the land's used for is pretty key with that one.
Right, Kathy, did you want to add something to that?
Yes, I just wanted to say, of all the many statistics as I worked out when we first had the solar farm installed, we actually worked out that of a 12.5 acre field, only 3% was no longer normal soil and grass and vegetation surface. And I didn't mention the figure, but the biodiversity net gain for the field was 174%. So I'm just saying, in the circumstances we were in with the technology available, we felt that was actually a really wonderful outcome for that field. It couldn't be used for anything else. It's not got the strength for building anything on it, and you couldn't use it to sustain animals or crops all year round. So this is a gradual recovery process, which we actually feel is working hand in hand with producing pollution-free electricity.
Yeah, Cassie, I mean, just comment on that very quickly. Kathy, I think that's absolutely right. I think we're in a different paradigm now with the Environment Act, local nature recovery, making sure this is joined up. Having isolated sites with high nature is good, but we need to make it sustainable, and that requires a bigger thought piece, which no doubt will come our way, as I guess, Kelsey, at some stage from Hampshire.
Yes, hopefully sooner rather than later, but I'm not holding my breath. But right, Ollie, would you like to come in?
Well, it was just saying, and Danny, welcome this whole, kind of agenda piece. This is where that local community buy-in and like a model like the one that Kathy has talked about, where you can really buy into that approach, because I think they need to evolve. A large-scale solar farm can be for 25 years, or even longer. And you need to be open to the art of the possible with that as well. You can put community orchards in and fruit growing and things like that. It's down to having that governance in place to enable it over that time period as well.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, thank you. Chris Holloway asked a question, but I think we've dealt with that in the chat, and we'll carry on that conversation offline. So I'd like to invite Atul Deshmukh to speak and ask his question. I've permitted your mic, Atul. If you unmute yourself, you can ask your question. Oh, he's not coming in, but the question in the chat was if I can find it, was what about the current status and future of nuclear energy in the UK? I think, while obviously we're not thinking about introducing a nuclear power plant at the moment into the Winchester district, obviously nuclear is expected to have a part to play in our future energy mix. So how does where we are with nuclear energy fit in with the renewable energy agenda? Deepika?
Yeah, thank you. So absolutely, the technologies at the moment with the renewable, and I was talking about the efficiency. So seeing the kind of deficit in the energy demand and supply, nuclear in the middle term, I do see they will play an important role. And that is the reason, if you see at the moment, currently around 16% generation installed capacity is nuclear, with 5 operating plants. And there are 3 which have been given or under consultation, the more recent one. So one is Bradwell B in Essex, the other is Hinkley Point C in Somerset, and then there's the other one which actually got approval last year, which is Sizewell C in Suffolk. So they are the latest one, which would be the addition which will coming in the nuclear, seeing the requirement and the energy need of the hour. But yes, in the future, I would think that with our technology, the renewable technology becoming much stronger, better, more efficient, I think there would be a kind of a phase out where the generation will be able to meet the need. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Right, Frank Pearson appears to have disappeared, but his is he still online? No. His question was essentially, are we looking at our car parks as part of the land available for solar power?
Yes, very much so. I think is from our side on the initial analysis, particularly the largest schemes are very interesting. But yeah, car parks and EVs, and obviously if we move towards electric vehicles, there's that other pathway there of being able to charge the cars directly with solar power. So you're avoiding any carbon in the grid from gas or coal. You're actually having its renewables going into your car, and you can see where those renewables are being generated. It's a very interesting way of looking at it.
Right. Yes, thank you. Yes, that is definitely something that we're quite keen to look at. I think it has very good possibilities. We do have a significant area of flat car parking. We do already have a car park in Winchester which has solar panels on the roof, and we can definitely look at some of the others. Right, I have a question from Patrick Davis. Patrick, I've enabled your mic, so if you'd like to unmute yourself, then please ask your question.
Yes, thank you very much. My concern is a lot of the material tonight was very interesting, but I wonder, apart from the local plan, which we got on towards the end, is it really sensible to do this on the scale of a small, funny shaped, artificial boundaries of a small district council? Wouldn't it be much more sensible, with all the technical advice you're now employing, to do it in conjunction with your neighbours? All the reference to the Solent, to other parts of Hampshire, it does seem to me rather odd that most of this work is being done on the level of a district council. Isn't it in the long term going to be very wasteful doing it that way?
I think one of the important things is that district councils tend to move at very different rates to each other. Certainly my experience of working with other councils is that if you want a piece of work done relatively rapidly, which we are in a climate emergency, and I think it's important that we move forward quite rapidly on this, rather than try and work with the timescales of lots of other authorities. There is some significant work going on a more cross-boundary basis, but that is looking more at the bigger infrastructure things. Andrew, did you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I think it's an important point. I think there's an important thing if there's a mix of renewables needed here. You do need the big offshore stuff, which is controlled by the Crown Estate, but having locally generated and also locally used electricity, if it's more locally there, the way the network works is you do feed into the grid, but that's electricity. If you've got some solar panels on your roof and you've got excess, it's likely to going to be used by your neighbour, not just disappear off into the grid. It is going there. It's hard to document it, but actually we as electrical engineers, you know that that's where it's going. But there's answers at all levels, and on the slightly boring technical analysis, it is very important to have these things distributed about, because if you've got shade just down the coast to 2 hours away, it's important that you've got generation there. It helps the overall frequency of the grid for the electricity. So yeah, lots of little stuff is good alongside the big stuff. It's a multifaceted thing with that.
Did anybody else want to comment on their experiences in this area? Yeah, I mean, certainly from my point of view, I think this is an important piece of work, because we do own land as a council, the car parks that have been mentioned, significant amounts of roof space, although we have been doing a pretty good job of covering an awful lot of that with solar panels already, but also broadening it out from rooftop solar to thinking about those broader renewable energy issues. Right, I have Kate, who'd like to ask a question. I've unmuted you. Would you like to unmute yourself and ask the question? Right, I don't have a surname. So. Right, Kate, are you there? No. So I have a question from Joe Crocker. Who's asking about issues connecting into the grid. Joe, I've enabled your microphone. Would you like to speak? Oh. Joe, are you there?
Hi, Kelsey. Sorry, it's Kate here. I've only just figured out how to unmute myself. And
Okay.
I suspect that that's maybe an issue for other people too. In case anyone's wondering, it's the mic at the top of the page, not the one next to the name. Is it okay if I ask me a question?
Yes, please? Certainly. Go ahead.
Right. Well, I've had lots of questions and they've kind of been answered as we've been going along, but I'd still like to ask Kathy Cook, please. You said that you started by finding and then you raised money, you know, community shares and stuff. Was that how you paid for the land, or did you get the land first and then raise the money to actually provide the, you know, the solar panels and that, please?
Yes, there were two different financial transactions. In fact, the field was bought by our founder, director, Anthony Woolhouse, because he realised that's actually what he wanted to do, and he'd got this sum of money and he was definitely going to buy a field somewhere. So he actually bought the field and we rent it from him. The solar cooperative rent it from him. So he did say that it was unfortunately going to be his son's money for his helping with his house, but it turned into a solar field, the sum of money. So I think the interest earned off the or the rent earned off the field is helpful for the family. So that's the field, and then the actual fundraise for the solar farm itself. We did that, as I explained, through a share offer, and that was just to any members of the public with a priority to those living locally first, and then after 4 weeks we opened it up to a wider geographical area for anyone else who was interested to actually be a member and to contribute. So it was,
thank you very much. I just wondered if Winchester City Council might be able to help small communities to do the same sort of thing by maybe providing grants to buy fields, or by renting fields to local communities. It's getting hold of the field, isn't it? That seems to be one of the main, you know, stumbling blocks to even starting. I just wondered what the council could do in terms of that. So instead of the council, you know, having to run everything and do everything, you know, just sort of help local communities to do that.
Yeah, I mean, we are severely financially constrained, as everyone is in local government at the moment. So certainly our capital funding available for those kind of projects would be relatively limited. What we have been exploring is ways of community fundraising, which might allow us to raise money or to help communities raise their own money for these kind of projects. So that's something that we'd be exploring and looking at whether we can kind of back that up and help people feel confident in investing small amounts of money into what might be quite a big scheme. But we do need to do a bit more exploration and a bit more, get a bit more financial confidence
Thank
in
you.
going
And another,
down that route.
thank
But
you. And
it
another,
is, yeah, carry on.
another quick one. I just wondered if you talked about a kind of audit of your rooftop and your, what you've got available. I just wondered if you have a percentage for how much rooftop space is actually currently being used by Winchester City Council for solar power.
I think Anna may have some figures on that, but I don't know if we've got it in percentage
also,
as much as area.
Okay.
So that we just touched on it on our information video. We've got over 2,000 panels, so that's spread across our housing properties. As Kelsey mentioned, car parks and our own corporate buildings like our city office. So they generate about 500 megawatts a year. And we've also got panels that we've sort of facilitated on 2 local businesses, Biffa and Marwell, where we can supply them with energy under a power purchase agreement that's below the rate that they would otherwise be paying. And we were able to do that through grants that we were able to sort of access as a council. So certainly our grants officer gives that small grants that can help people get going on some small bits of work, sort of project grants and so on. And she also is quite knowledgeable about other grants that comes up, whether it's sort of national lottery or whatever. So she's a good person to keep in touch with. I'll drop her email into the chat in a minute.
Okay, thank you.
So I don't know the percentage. I think we supplied 10% of our own energy needs through solar, but I think we've increased the number of panels since then slightly, so it's probably gone up since last year.
And are you going to be kind of nailing down some kind of figures and having a target? Is that what you're going to be doing?
Well, we effectively we have those two big targets around decarbonising the council and the district, and solar energy will be part of that mix. But there'll be lots of other things that go into it. I think it's worth saying that a percentage of roofs covered is not necessarily a useful metric, because it depends which way they're facing and what the capability is of them to actually support solar panels. So it's not a definite that you can put panels on everywhere. I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to go back to Joe Crocker's question. So Joe's question was, I hear that there are issues about connecting local renewable energy generation into the grid, and how is that being explored by Winchester City Council and partners? So I'll hand over to the experts for that one. Deepika?
Yeah, maybe Deepika, you take that one actually, as you're organising our call with SSE.
Yeah. So you're absolutely right. In order to actually understand the challenges and how the connectivity will happen, we are engaging with the DNOs. DNO at the moment, I think in the area is SSE. And once we'll have more clarity based on this engagement and others, that which specific area land parcels to be considered, then we'll check through that viability as well. Where the connectivity issue isn't there, I think that will also be a big deciding factor for the council. So engagement has already started, and once we are more clear about the various land parcels, we'll try to vet it through them and prepare an analysis of the same. Thank you.
Right, thanks. Right, I'm going to go back to Happold, who has reappeared in the chat. Right, Happold, if you'd like to enable your microphone, which, as has been said, is in the top right hand corner of the screen, and ask your question.
Hi, good afternoon.
Hi, Atul.
Good afternoon. Calling from Edmonton, Canada. My question is, I read an article that in Europe now UK is not part of European Union, and many countries having reservation on wind farms, offshore wind farms. So how UK will take care of that?
Yeah, offshore wind farms aren't my area of expertise. Can anybody respond to that one?
Yeah, so with offshore wind, it's basically entirely up to the Crown Estate who own the seabed. They put out leases at various times. Big multi-billion pound projects is the most efficient way actually of doing offshore wind. Sometimes you can invest as part of a offshore wind farm. It's not a common model, but you can see it. And yeah, essentially these rounds come up every so often, and yeah, big things get taken forward.
No, my question is now UK is not part of European Union, and many Western European northern countries having some objection on new installation of wind farms. So is how UK will take care in future about this?
Yeah,
sorry, is that offshore wind? Because if it's within the Crown Estate, if it's within 12 nautical miles, it's UK land, so they don't have a say. Is essentially where it sits. There's yeah.
I think is it worth mentioning, Andrew, so obviously after we left the European Union, we continue at present to have the requirement in UK law for environmental impact assessment of projects like that. And the government is at the moment consulting on changes to that regime. So at the moment, we still essentially follow the European process for assessing environmental impacts and so on, and gaining authorization of projects such as that. But things might be changing a little in the coming years.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So we're coming to the end of the session now. So I have a final question from Councillor James Batho. Right, James, what's your question?
The question was regarding rooftop solar. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Regarding rooftop solar, obviously in the analysis, it was one of the sort of lower cost options that is available to the City Council. And I'm just wondering, though we concentrated very much in the then presentations on sort of solar farms, whether there's any option or any sort of viability for community schemes for rooftop solar, sort of across the district. So that was the question I've got in terms of what we can do in terms of increasing our solar generation. Thank you.
James, can you explain what you mean by a community rooftop scheme, or what would you understand as what would that look like?
It's sort of potentially, sort of households getting together and actually sort of having a sort of a contract or a large community facility like a community centre or somewhere that's sort of got a sort of a large area that could be put to solar use, and that is then funded through sort of the local community being involved. Very similar to what the scheme that was explained in the presentation, but actually sort of on rooftops rather than sort of in the countryside. So it's I suppose not acknowledging that, as we've said, that the planning and sort of the acquisition of land elsewhere is potentially contentious. It's actually looking at space that's already available and is actually sort of developed in the city and district, but finding ways that communities can actually sort of contribute and sort of be involved in the purchase and the benefit then of that sort of energy production.
Right, Ollie,
I think I'd probably best to answer that. So a standard community energy model would look at that. I think, you know, the tool that we discussed with Danny Lee earlier, something like that would be able to focus in on like streets or solar rooftops, where some of the work that Andrew does probably dives into that on GIS mapping as well, that Buro Happold do. So the next thing is highlighting areas where solar could be installed on rooftops, and then looking at how that can be financed. Now, you know, that's the thing, you know, it's like I'd love to have solar on my house if I could afford it, or I had a windfall and member of my family passed away, or I got a lovely donation from an aunt or something, and then I installed solar that way, or bonus at work, or I was able to finance it through my mortgage, and you know, and Nationwide at the moment does a green mortgage. But there are also financial methods that we can explore with the council in time, like a company called Lendology that works with 19 local authorities to provide low-cost retrofit finance loan models. And then there is also the opportunity for group buying. So we've got community energy projects around the country, like a terrace street of social housing, or low-cost houses where solar has been put on all of them, but that has been funded by the community through a share offer, which I explained earlier. So there's lots of options for that as well. And there's also local authorities have solar together schemes where lots of people can bid into a solar buying scheme and try and drive down the cost. So one more, up in Waltham Forest, a couple last year camped on their roof. I'm not suggesting anybody should do this for health and safety reasons, obviously, but they did a wonderful campaign, and through that campaign they raised money for their whole street to have solar. And so that was a really cool project. You can Google it, it's up in Waltham Forest. So yeah, there's lots of initiatives that we can coordinate to help with that, and work with the council on.
Right, I'll just invite Anna back in. Do you want to say a quick word about Solar Together?
Yes, I just posted a link in the chat. Winchester had really good take up of Solar Together, although obviously the original applications, there's a sort of dropout stage when people get their quote to actually follow through. But I think we were the highest percentage in Hampshire, or one of them. I've put the link in the chat. I understand from my colleagues at Hampshire County Council it is reopening around August, but we haven't had final confirmation or details. But generally it opens in August for maybe 4 to 5 weeks. You have to express an interest, and then closes at the end of September.
Right, thank you. Right, well, that brings us to the end of questions. So I'm going to hand back to Anna for a final Slido, and to give us a few words about where we're going next.
Well, I thought what I would do is we'll circulate the slides, but there's a few useful websites for Community Energy South, and also for the West Solent Solar Co-op, and also for our own page on renewables, which has got quite a lot of information, and WinAC's invaluable web pages on renewables as well. So if we circulate the slides, that will be in there. We are launching a short survey to get your views. That's now live on our citizen space area. So there's a web link there, and also a QR code. So if you want to let us know what you think, please quickly scan the QR code, and that should hopefully, with your phone, that should take you into that. And then we've got an in-person Renewables Open Forum, which is a drop-in anytime between 2 p.m. and 8 p.m. And that's on Monday, the 10th of July in the courtyard room at Winchester Guildhall. So I think we're just past 8 o'clock. So I'll leave that slide up so that you can scan the QR code for the survey, if that's all right, Kelsey.
Yes, that's fine. We'll skip the final Slido. So that brings us to the end of our event this evening. So I would like to thank everybody who's attended, encourage you all to respond to that citizen space survey, because we really are interested in what you think about where we should be going in this area of our work, and indeed where we can be working better with you to achieve more renewable energy in the district. So thank you very much. And with that, I'll say good night.